She walked into a hotel elevator alone and walked out into one of the most disturbing mysteries of the modern era. What happened to Elisa Lam did not unfold in an alley, a dark forest, or a crime-ridden street. It happened inside a public hotel, surrounded by people, cameras, and locked doors. And yet, within hours, she vanished completely. No witnesses, no clear timeline, no explanation that has ever fully made sense. Elisa Lam was 21 years old when she arrived in Los Angeles in January 2013. A university student from Vancouver, Canada, she was traveling alone along the West Coast, documenting her journey through blog posts and messages to friends and family. By all accounts, Elisa was intelligent, creative, and introspective. She wrote openly about her struggles with mental health, but also about her excitement for travel and independence. For her stay in Los Angeles, Elisa chose the Cecil Hotel, a historic but troubled building in downtown LA. Opened in 1927, the Cecil had developed a grim reputation over decades. Numerous deaths, suicides, and violent incidents had been linked to the hotel, earning it an unsettling place in local lore. By the time Elisa checked in, it was no longer a luxury destination, but a low-cost hotel attracting long-term residents and transient guests. At first, Elisa behaved normally. She explored the city and remained in contact with her family, who expected regular check-ins from her. But toward the end of January, hotel staff began to notice unusual behavior. Elisa had initially been assigned to a shared room, but her roommates complained that she was acting strangely, leading hotel management to move her into a private room. On January 31st, 2013, Elisa was last seen alive. That same day, the now infamous elevator surveillance footage was recorded. The video showed Elisa entering the elevator, pressing several buttons, stepping in and out of the car, and making erratic hand gestures. She appeared to hide, peek into the hallway, and react to something unseen. The elevator doors failed to close for an extended period, adding to the eerie nature of the footage. No one else appeared on camera. Soon after that moment, Elisa vanished. When she failed to check out of the hotel and stopped contacting her family, concern escalated quickly. On February 1st, she was officially reported missing. Police launched a search of the Cecil Hotel, including her room, common areas, and nearby streets. Her personal belongings were still in her room. There was no evidence she had packed up or planned to leave. As days passed, the search widened. Police dogs were brought in and reportedly traced her scent to an open window near the fire escape, suggesting she may have accessed the exterior of the building. Still, no physical trace of Elisa was found. Flyers were distributed, and the case began to gain media attention. Nearly 3 weeks later, on February 19th, hotel guests began complaining about low water pressure and an unusual taste and color in the water. A maintenance worker was sent to inspect the water tanks on the hotel roof. When he opened one of the tanks, he made a horrifying discovery. Elisa Lam's body was inside. The revelation stunned both investigators and the public. The water tanks were located on the roof, an area that was reportedly secured and difficult to access. The tanks themselves were large, cylindrical containers, and questions immediately arose about how Elisa could have reached the roof, climbed onto a tank, and entered it. The autopsy concluded that Elisa's death was accidental. No signs of physical assault were found, and toxicology reports indicated that she was not under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs. The coroner noted her history of bipolar disorder and suggested that she may have been experiencing a manic or psychotic episode at the time of her death. Despite the official ruling, public skepticism grew rapidly. One of the biggest points of contention was access. Conflicting reports emerged about whether the rooftop doors were locked and whether the water tank lids were open or closed at the time of discovery. The hotel's history, combined with inconsistencies in early statements, fueled distrust. The elevator footage became a focal point for speculation. Online communities dissected every movement, slowing the video down frame by frame. Some claimed the footage had been altered or edited. Others believed Elisa was reacting to a real but unseen person. Psychologists and medical experts countered that her behavior was consistent with a severe manic episode, possibly exacerbated by medication noncompliance. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some suggested foul play by hotel staff or guests. Others linked the case to the Cecil Hotel's violent past or proposed supernatural explanations. At the same time, mental health advocates urged the public to view the case through a clinical lens rather than sensationalism, emphasizing how misunderstood manic episodes can appear to outsiders. Legal action followed. Elisa's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hotel, arguing that inadequate security and unsafe conditions contributed to her death. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed, with the court ruling that the hotel could not have reasonably prevented the incident. Years later, the Cecil Hotel was rebranded and partially renovated, but its reputation remains inseparable from the Lam case. Documentaries, podcasts, and online investigations continue to revisit her story, each attempting to answer the same haunting questions. Was Elisa Lam's death a tragic accident driven by untreated mental illness? Or was there a failure by the hotel, by authorities, or by circumstances that allowed her to disappear in such a baffling way? What is certain is that Elisa Lam's story struck a deep chord with the public. It sits at the uncomfortable intersection of mystery, tragedy, and mental health, reminding us how easily a young life can vanish, and how some questions may never have clear answers. As public attention intensified, journalists and independent investigators began uncovering details that complicated the official narrative even further. One overlooked element was Elisa Lam's online presence. Before her disappearance, Elisa had been actively blogging under a pseudonym, writing candidly about identity, loneliness, pressure, and self-perception. Her writing revealed a young woman who was reflective and self-aware, not reckless. Friends later stated that Elisa was meticulous about staying in touch during her trip, calling her parents daily, and updating them on her plans. The sudden silence was not normal behavior for her. Hotel records showed that Elisa had been moved from a shared room to a private one after roommates complained, not of violence, but of erratic behavior. This detail raised questions. If hotel staff had noticed concerning behavior, why was there no wellness check or follow-up? Why was she moved rather than monitored? Then there was the timeline gap. Elisa disappeared on January 31st, but her body was not found until February 19th, despite police searches of the hotel, including rooftop areas. Authorities later claimed search dogs had been on the roof, but did not detect her scent near the water tanks. This detail became one of the most debated aspects of the case. Critics argued that if Elisa had entered the tank shortly before her death, evidence should have been detected. Supporters of the official ruling countered that environmental factors could explain the absence of scent. Another unsettling detail involved the water tank access. Former employees and fire safety officials offered conflicting accounts about how easy it was to reach the roof. Some said the roof was secured and alarmed. Others stated that alarms were often disabled and that guests had previously accessed the roof without interference. These inconsistencies made it difficult to establish a definitive version of events. The elevator footage itself raised technical questions. Internet users noticed that the timestamp appeared altered and that certain portions seemed slowed down. Authorities later explained that the video had been modified to protect the integrity of the investigation, but this explanation only deepened public mistrust. For many viewers, the footage became symbolic, not just of Elisa's disappearance, but of institutional opacity. Medical experts weighed in years later, emphasizing that bipolar disorder, particularly during manic episodes, can lead to disorientation, paranoia, and impulsive behavior. They stressed that such episodes can appear frightening or inexplicable to observers unfamiliar with mental health crises. Still, critics argued that mental illness alone did not sufficiently explain every aspect of the case. The case also exposed broader systemic failures. Downtown Los Angeles at the time struggled with understaffed hotels, minimal security oversight, and a lack of coordinated emergency response. The Cecil Hotel operated at the intersection of tourism, long-term housing, and urban neglect. Elisa, a young traveler alone in an unfamiliar environment, was vulnerable within that system. As documentaries and investigations continued, a quieter conversation began to emerge, one about how society interprets mystery. Elisa Lam's death became a case study in how incomplete information, disturbing visuals, and institutional silence can give rise to speculation. Each unanswered question created space for theories, some grounded in evidence, others fueled by fear. Years later, the Cecil Hotel attempted to shed its past, changing its name and branding. Yet Elisa Lam's story remains inseparable from the building. Visitors still ask about the elevator. Online forums still analyze the footage. And her name continues to surface whenever discussions turn to unexplained deaths in modern cities. What lingers most is not a single unanswered question, but the accumulation of them. Why were early statements inconsistent? Why did security measures fail so completely? Why did it take nearly 3 weeks to find her? Elisa Lam did not simply disappear. She slipped through gaps in oversight, in communication, and perhaps in understanding. Her story endures because it sits at the crossroads of mystery, mental health, and institutional failure. It is not just a case about what happened in a hotel. It is a reminder of how easily uncertainty can become legend, and how some truths remain forever just out of reach. As the case continued to circulate globally, several contradictions between official statements and later disclosures became harder to ignore. One of the most debated issues was the condition of the water tank lid. Initial reports suggested the lid was closed when Elisa's body was found, which immediately raised alarms. How could someone close the heavy lid from inside? Later, police clarified that the lid was actually open when discovered. This shift in narrative, even if unintentional, damaged public trust and fueled suspicion that key details were being clarified only after intense scrutiny. There was also confusion surrounding the hotel's alarm system. Authorities claimed that accessing the roof would have triggered alarms. Yet former guests and employees later stated that alarms were frequently disabled or ignored due to false triggers. Some guests even admitted to having previously accessed the roof without intervention. This suggested that Elisa reaching the roof may not have been as difficult as initially portrayed. Another overlooked detail involved Elisa's medication. Toxicology reports showed that some prescribed medications were either absent or present in lower than expected levels in her system. Medical professionals explained that irregular intake could contribute to disorientation or paranoia. However, critics questioned why this detail was not emphasized earlier, and whether hotel staff were adequately trained to respond when a guest appeared to be in psychological distress. The timing of the elevator footage release also raised eyebrows. The video was made public nearly 2 weeks after Elisa was reported missing, a move that some argued was intended to generate leads. Instead, it became a viral phenomenon, overshadowing traditional investigative methods. Rather than helping locate Elisa, the footage transformed the case into a spectacle, inviting millions of amateur analyses that blurred the line between investigation and entertainment. Meanwhile, witness accounts were scarce. No hotel guest definitively reported seeing Elisa after the elevator incident. In a building with hundreds of occupants, this absence of reliable eyewitness testimony was unusual. It highlighted how anonymous and isolating large urban hotels can be, especially for solo travelers. Legal proceedings added another layer of complexity. When Elisa's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hotel, they argued that Cecil failed to provide adequate security and failed to act after recognizing Elisa's distressed behavior. The court ultimately ruled in favor of the hotel, stating that the events were unforeseeable. For many observers, the ruling felt procedural rather than satisfying, addressing legal responsibility but not moral accountability. Over time, the narrative surrounding Elisa Lam shifted. Early coverage focused on mystery and fear. Later discussions became more reflective, examining how mental health crises are often misunderstood, especially when filtered through surveillance footage and internet speculation. Mental health advocates criticized how Elisa's behavior was dissected publicly without context, turning symptoms into entertainment. Yet even with these explanations, the case never fully settled. Why were search efforts unable to locate her sooner? Why were initial reports so inconsistent? Why did no safety protocol intervene earlier? These unresolved questions ensure that Elisa Lam's case remains open in the public consciousness, even if it is officially closed. Today, the story is less about one night at a hotel and more about how modern mysteries are created through partial information, delayed clarity, institutional gaps, and viral media. Elisa Lam's death became a mirror reflecting society's discomfort with ambiguity, mental illness, and accountability. Her story endures not because it is sensational, but because it is unfinished. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. In the end, Elisa Lam's story resists a clean conclusion. Officially, her death was ruled an accident, yet the questions left behind continue to echo far louder than the answers. What happened inside the Cecil Hotel was not just a tragedy, but a convergence of vulnerability, institutional failure, and unanswered gaps that time has never fully closed. Elisa did not simply disappear. She was lost in the spaces where certainty breaks down, leaving behind a mystery that remains, even now, unsettlingly incomplete.